What is the right time? Walk when it's great to crawl. Play when it's great to write. What is the right time? To be a born talent. To be a future champion. To walk alone. Playing under 16 at 12. Facing 20,000 balls with a half-grown spine. What is the right time? Too little to be selected, too talented to be rejected. The papers, selectors all asking, what is the right time? The right time, it's when you do it. They say you're too young to play, but you're always old enough to dream.
Don't worry about what the future will look like. Just prepare for it. Fearless plans from Aegis Federal Life Insurance help you and your family prepare for the future.
Coming to the World Cup, Ash, I mean, the journey ends there. By the way, this is not the end. The end is, I miss it. I miss the greatest Indian match winner. If there is an Indian match winner who has stood out for me in the last decade, it's this man. How did he do that? You know, winning one after another test match for India with his 5 firsts, that's not there. That's sequel. That's coming. That's part 2. That will happen. The part 2 will happen. So I can promise you, I've asked him that. Why does it end there? The Preeti part is not there. I mean, it's just happening. It's happening, and the love affair, and it's not there. It'll happen. But Ashwin, World Cup.
No, so Boria, I mean, we started writing this book in 2020 or 2021. I can't remember exactly. I'll have to jog my memory back. When we started writing it, right, it was, in a way, it was very, very raw, organic, at the same time, very straight from the heart, and very, you know, I loved the way it came out. But the fact that it was, you know, it was going into a long sort of a range. It was getting very, very informative, and it was not having boundaries, is when I realized I had to go back into the genre where I had to split it into parts, because I wanted to say the story in a very organic manner. And I believed even the smallest of things, even the way I came through as a young child in that school, also had to have some weightage, you know. And I enjoyed the journey. And I'm just straight here. I didn't want to write an autobiography. Like, I don't want to say I went here, I did this, I'm great, I did this game was this. No, I don't want to do that. I want to share my life experiences with people through a real story, because everybody's life is a story at the end of the day. And if I can share that story, and if it impacts someone in a positive manner, if they can learn something out of it, which is what I have done all through my career, I would have achieved my goal. And I've always been fascinated by writing a sequel. I love it. I just love it. And when the first time I suggested this to the publishers, they were like, you're not sure autobiographies sell well in, sequels. And I said, I'm not writing an autobiography. So I had to really bring it out in a fashion where they saw the meat of it. And even now, I mean, I have it. The other parts are done, actually, to be fair. But I've just broken it down into a piece where I want to sketch it back. If you look at it, the last part is a bit sketchy.
Yes.
So I'm going back to that sketchy parts, you know, and I want to start unraveling that part of it, because I think the journey between about 2008 to 2011 requires even more detailing about how I broke into the Indian team. And I want to get there.
That is my question. Tell me about breaking into the Indian team and when you wore that Indian jersey, because, you know, for someone like you, it must have meant the world. I did not get it here. I did not get what it meant. And then the World Cup. Tell me about it, because I missed. Yes, you mentioned you go back and the whole neighborhood and that story and Shane Watson and all of that is there, but it's still not there. I want more. Give me that.
No, that's what I'm saying. So if I don't explain this part of it, right, and if I start to write a piece where I run Joss Butler out, or I get into the Indian team and start getting competitive, or I get into the Indian team or run the drinks and I learn the journey through running the drinks, it doesn't really make sense. So I want people to understand who this guy is, you know, who this child is. Basically, there is a child that's grown up, that's fascinated by playing for India, but what India means to him and how he gets there and learns. Unless and until there is also a South Indian in there, right? There is a Madrasi in there. And yes, I want that Madrasi to come out. At the end of the day, look, I think there is a part where I've clearly written that we need to understand India better. because even as a Madrasi, right, for me, India was
the whole Hindi issue as well.
Not only the Hindi issue. I think we need to understand that there's a wider world. India is a fascinating country. It is a fascinating country. And if you thought you sit in your own well and you want to keep croaking, then it doesn't work. And for me, nobody told me that you're sitting inside a well. I had to learn and discover it. So why should another youngster who comes from my part of the world come out and have to discover it on his own? Let him know what it is like. So I want that side of it to come out. How was Madras in the 90s? What it meant for the cricketer there, and what we thought of India and what it wasn't, and how I have to learn. So that is why I finished there, and I'm going to pick it up from slightly behind from where I finished, which is, I think, I don't know. I haven't kept timelines, but if I get that finite distance of the finish, I'll probably be out very soon.
But because you mentioned the World Cup, Ash, I mean, give me a sense. I mean, when you went back, yes, and the whole neighborhood story of after going back, after winning the 2011 World Cup, and you mentioned the breaking into the Indian team. Can you give me a sense what that cap meant, what that Indian jersey meant, what the World Cup win? How did it, I mean, have you processed it? How long did it take to process that you were actually world champion, the best in the world, doing something that you always dreamt of doing?
See, look, I think when I broke into the Indian team, I had done my hard yards and broken into the Indian team. And the noise around the whole thing of me breaking into the Indian team came from a lot of my performances at CSK, right? Because I had broken into the CSK team in 2009. I gave away a runaway performance in 2010. But people hardly know the story behind me playing first class cricket, how hard I had to work to get into CSK, and what I did at CSK, what was my journey with Dhoni, and then how did I break into the Indian team. And for literally 2 years between 2009 to 11, I was running drinks, and my opportunities were very few and far. And several times I used to feel, okay, I'm just carrying the drinks. What am I doing here? But I can't. Only if I write a hindsightful piece into the next sequel of this will I be able to elaborate on how that 2 years where I ran drinks made me who I was much later in 2015 and 16. And that's why I write that Gary Kirsten's piece towards the end.
Yes.
Because I think that would allow me that piece to pick up from where I had to leave.
You and Dhoni had to be. I mean, clearly when Raina was captaining, you mentioned that, and that whole CSK piece there, and that you do talk about in detail, by the way, in the book. And I find that fascinating when you came and those important matches in the IPL, 4-13, 2 wickets, etc. Just get me a little bit more. I mean, you and Dhoni is another fascinating CSK, very local, Madrasi, etc. love affair. Tell me that.
See, I think Dhoni, right, the first 1 year, he didn't know that I existed. I don't think he knew, or maybe he knew and he didn't really, make, that's Dhoni. I've known him for almost, 15, 16, 17 years, like at a close quarters. And with him, I felt what he was in 2008-9 is exactly how he operates till 2024. That is fascinating for me. And it is not an ordinary thing. Because I remember that game in 2010 where he gets hit by Shane Bond in his arm, right? I think at Eden Gardens. I get a wicket, I get Shane Bond out in that game, but he gets hit on his arm. And he goes out of the side. But I have begun the IPL reasonably well. This is supposedly going to be my first full year in the IPL. And he goes out and Raina leads the side. I think they both have probably slightly different views in terms of how they handle, people. I don't bowl inside the power play. I bowl slightly later because Muralidharan and I are playing in the same team. And I end up bowling death in Bangalore. I haven't had a good time. I've let down the team in 3 occasions then after Dhoni leaves. But as soon as Dhoni comes back to captain the side, he picks up the puzzle where he leaves. I think I'm almost certain he calls and says, I want that guy back. I come back and he again uses me with the new ball because he uses me inside the power play with the new ball against Adam Gilchrist, and I get Adam Gilchrist out in Chennai. And he uses me again in those same roles and continues to use me like that for several years to follow. He uses me inside power play, he uses me inside the batting power play, even when I play for India. So I think that's quite a fascinating sort of a belief that he had. And he kept it very simple when he told me things. He always said, your greatest strength is to try new things, is trying to be funky. So don't change that for anybody else. And I think I told it in that book launch also. I was 35. I met him in Dubai after that game over. I was playing for Delhi against CSK. And I asked him, how did you find I built that, I've developed that back spinner. Said, Ash, that's been your strength. Remember, you continue to be funky. Remember, you continue to work on your variations. I'm like, this is what he told me 15 years ago. The man continues to say the same thing. And then, after a brief pause, he tells me again, you know what? I know what you're thinking, but that is your strength. Whatever it is for me, that will always remain your strength. So keep being funky, keep expressing yourself. And that kind of, maybe it's not just the cricket that he sees. He sees the, more sort of a mental strength side of things or the mental aptitude side of things. Maybe he's able to pick that on cricketers. And I find that he did that with Tushar Deshpande also for CSK. So he continues to do that. He continues to pick people who are good in certain roles and fills them in.
The carom ball, with the tennis ball, and then the discovery that you can actually do it with the red ball. Another fascinating story in the book. By the way, how do you pronounce it? It's Sodaku.
It's Soduku.
Soduku.
They say it's Soduku. It's not. Sudoku is that game. They say it's Soduku. Soduku means you do that in Tamil, right? The sound comes. It's called Soduku. So you click that, that sound comes. So again, it's the same thing. My dad hated me for playing tennis ball cricket. But I am very thankful for having played that all my life. A lot of people used to go and tell him that I bowl that really well. He used to avoid sending me to the tennis ball matches. But one of those days when Ajanta Mendes burst onto the scene, he said, why don't you try it with the cricket ball? But I had started bowling only for 5-6 years. I just broken into the first class team. And that kind of mentorship from W.V. Raman is also something that I'm very thankful for. Like I said, there are several people who came in and played their role to the team for me to achieve what I've achieved today. Because the turnarounds, how I became a bowler after being a batter, how the injury came and I came back and didn't bowl. My mom came to the game. She asked me to turn around to be a spinner. Because I was just standing, these are stories that are meant to be. After a point of time, if you believe you're very powerful and you've done a lot of things and you're very successful, I think you're just feeding your ego unnecessarily. So I'm someone who's got a lot of gratitude for these people who assembled me.
Last two. One, are you an accidental off spinner in that sense?
Yes, I think so. I am an accidental off spinner because I started bowling leg breaks. I used to love Shane Warne. Between Shane Warne, Anil Kumble and Muthaiya Muralidharan, we used to have conversations in the house. But then Harbhajan became a favorite later on after the 2001 series. And I always used to love Shane Warne because of the pure, that gimmick that he used to bring to the table. He was a showman. He was a theatre artist. Yep. He was a theatre artist within those 22 yards. And for me, he fascinated me. But as soon as I started bowling leg breaks first up. And then I realized how tough an art it was. And then I started gaining respect for Anil Kumble. So one of those games in my academy games, I bowled leg spin. And they didn't give me more than 2 overs. Which is when I said, this is done. I'm going to start becoming an off spinner. At least I can land the ball on stumps. But fortunately enough, again, when I started bowling off spin, there were people who liked me for what I was doing. I think there is that story about how, one of those days, the coach told me not to give my names in selections. I think that story is there. And I am very thankful for that guy also, because I left school, joined college, and he said, mark my words, you're going to play for India as an off spinner one day. So, I don't know. I mean, I could have very well left my off spin at that stage when I left school because I was doing very well as a batter. But because of that, he used to call me once in 3 months and say, are you bowling? I'm like, yeah, I am bowling. So, yeah.
Last one, and that is another fascinating one when you talk about with the coach, that the coach says, this is what it is, but there is that argument. And it's said about you that nobody can convince you, nobody can beat you in the argument, but you will be the one who will silently go and start practicing what has been told. So that's your way to try and sort of experiment. You will not say it in the face, but you will still imbibe that. You will talk about that, and you will go and sort of see if this is working or not. Give me that side of the story and that particular story.
See, because I felt if I don't argue, right, I will not be able to get criticisms, or I'll not be able to dig deeper into someone's head.
Who was the coach here in the book you mentioned this was about?
There have been several coaches. There have been several, not one. There are instances again and again where I keep questioning people, and it is written on. Even Rahul Dravid writes about it in the.
Yeah, Rahul Dravid.
So I'm like, if I don't ask enough questions, I don't get enough answers. because in this particular sport, right, the right advice doesn't always come from people very, very immediately. They just wait. They wait for you to come and ask them questions. So the first thing coaches do is to come and tell you that you need to change this or change that. But unless and until I'm convinced about changing something, I won't. But if I'm convinced about changing something on my own, then I'm very powerful at it, getting it done. So I realized the more and more I question, the more and more argue, I'm finding answers. But somewhere or the other, when you question, right, it turns into an argument because people feel very challenged. But never once did I change this attitude. But I think this attitude comes to me from my dad. He used to question me a lot. He used to question people a lot. So I started getting that as a habit. And once I started questioning people, I started finding answers. Which is when I said this is a very powerful tool. Maybe people are pissed off, but it's okay. As long as I can, if they're hurt, I'll be okay to say sorry. Because my intention is not to hurt. However, as a child or as a 14, 15-year-old, I didn't have the clarity to tell them I'm sorry if I've hurt you. My mind would be like, okay, great. I'm a little bit like this Tare Zameen Par or a Three Idiots, sort of an Amir Khan sort of and that's why I love that movie also. I'm like, okay, it's an eureka moment. My eyes will go wide. Oh, I got the answer. Okay, let me go and try. But I would never stand there for a moment and say, sir, are you okay with me asking the questions? I would never do that. And I've consistently done that. I mean, there was another coach in my school. His name was Raman. I used to do the same thing with him. He used to tell me that I should not open the batting, that I should bat down the order. So I used to keep questioning him. I used to try and find out whether he was doing that to accommodate somebody else or whether he was justifying trying to do that for me, whether it was the best for me. So I used to keep asking questions. He didn't like me, so he removed me from captaincy. He put somebody else as a captain. Because I used to challenge people and their status quo, it has cost me also, but at the same time, I have benefited more than it's cost me.
I said, this is the last, but I have to ask. The Preeti story hasn't ended. You know, the school love, then the awkwardness. I mean, the World Cup, you have a chat. I mean, it's just, I was like, now there will be something here, but it's not there. Tell me that. You've got to give me something there.
No, like I said, right, the things ran very fast. Boria, mind you, from 2008 to 11, my life was on a treadmill at 25. Okay, it ran really quick. Imagine me winning 2 IPLs, 1 World Cup, and then winning 2 Champions League trophies, and I was player of the tournament, and I got married. There's a lot there for me to be able to do justice.
She was the first love in many ways. That's what.
Yes, she was. Yes, she was. Yes, she was. But the beauty of that was, I couldn't pick that puzzle up. I couldn't really pursue my first love, but I had to, focus on something else that was the real priority. My game was taking off. My health was also going through. I had to do my engineering. I was juggling a lot. But then suddenly, as our paths met, there was again a burst of too many emotions and a burst of too many things happening in my life. So when I go back there to pick the puzzle up is where I intend to address it. So the next sequel will probably get through as I go into go into some of my purple patches as a test cricketer. But this is where I intend to pick it up.
Fantastic. And I look forward to that because clearly I watched all from the debut test match to everything. I mean, practically every test match of yours, all your career was, and I make it no qualms to say you're one of my favorites. And you've come home, you've seen, you've seen the locality very similar backgrounds, very similar values, and you've been an absolute joy to watch. You're good for the sport. You're good for the sport because you enrich it and you question, you're argumentative. At the same time, you've got that purity about you. Love it. Absolutely love it. Once again, I push this book down your throat. I Have the Streets, a Kutti cricket story, Ravichandran Ashwin, with Siddharth Monga, forward by Rahul Dravid. Watch, read the book because again, it gives you, it enriches you and leaves you with a good taste in your mouth. Still several years of Ravi Ashwin left, touch wood, fingers crossed. Those have to come. I mean, this is not a news interview. I'm not going to go into that, but there's much left. This guy will go to Australia end of the year and I'll follow that as well. I remember that Steve Smith story, the obsession that it became with Ravi Ashwin the last time round. Get under his skin, get him out, and that whole battle, once again it'll unfold when India travels down under. Ash, thank you very much for your time. Love you both. Love you absolutely. But all the best to you. The journey hasn't ended. It's still on. And that sort of gives me goosebumps.
None of our journeys end, Boria. And that's the beauty of life. And I really embrace what's in front of me. Thank you so much for doing this once again. I enjoyed talking about the book because, I want to be my interests are very wide, as you know, as we have discussed. And there is a very deep and soft interior, and at the same time, a very fiery and, competitive exterior that I have, which I really want to bring it out and, want to add flight and feather and creativity to it. So being a writer, I really enjoyed being it. It's given me another feather to, another wing to fly. So thank you so much and really appreciate what you've done. Thank you.
Appreciate and thank you very much.